This is Susan Bassey. I'm here with my faithful puppy. I don't know if you can see her. And we're doing our live streams all this week while the jury is out on vacation, or they're dark in the courtroom in the malpractice lawsuit related to private judging and divorce attorneys in Santa Clara County. And today we are live streaming from the Santa Clara Police Department, which is directly across kitty corner the street from Santa Clara University, which is a private university. So today's live stream, I'm going to wait and see if I can get Johnny Bravo or John Denicola in here to make sure that my sound is good. And somebody give me a thumbs up when you come in. Just let me know that sound is good. Hi, Rosie, 5 Blue. Can you let me know whether or not the sound is good? Give me a thumbs up if it is. Can you hear me, Rosie? Okay. Hi, PJ650. Okay, so I am at the Santa Clara Police Department, and we're still talking about the relationship between policing and attorneys and private judges and the courts, criminal and civil, and so this is the best department to do it in. The Santa Clara Police is the only department in all of California where the police chief is elected. So that means by nature the police here are political because the police chief have to run for public office. And there's always a lot of controversy one way or the other when police officers are involved in politics. And those controversies exist on a local level even if there is not an election for the police chief. But one of the issues that we started reporting on is related to Mark Ericson, who's on trial in that malpractice case, and it's related to his client who was a 49er football player. And the 49ers came here to Santa Clara, built a stadium, it's Levi's Stadium. It hosted the Super Bowl in 2014. It's going to host it again. But one of the issues that came up was that when they built the stadium, they needed security. And so they started pulling police officers from Santa Clara and from San Jose to be the security for the stadium. And it was in their contracts, and they had to provide the security, and there wasn't enough available security. So police officers who were making between $200,000 and $300,000 a year were able to go and work for the Levi's Stadium, and they were able to make more money that the public didn't know how much they were being paid. So they could finish their regular shifts, collect their money, collect their pension, and then they could come and work here. And this is also the police department where Tyson Green was convicted of running a chop shop. He got a felony conviction. We pulled his case files, and what was interesting is all of these cases have taught me something that I'm going to try to teach everybody else. And so one of the things that happened in the Tyson Green case was he was prosecuted for a felony. He, I think, eventually took a plea. I'd have to go back through. But when I posted about that on social media, the county quickly said that it was a different Tyson Green, because the county actually hired Tyson Green in code enforcement. So with a felony conviction, while the case was still pending, Santa Clara County government hired Tyson Green, who had either retired or been fired from this police department after he was arrested and charged with running a chop shop. So he was taking car parts, and interestingly enough, it was a retired police officer who turned him in. And we can really see that there is an older crowd of police officers who are a little more ethical. And when the money from Silicon Valley and the 49ers poured into this area, we started to see police officers and the connection to money beyond what they make in the department and out of the public eye become more of an issue. So what's interesting about that is secondary employment that police officers were allowed to have is very similar to private judging. Private judging is attorneys doing secondary employment. They're an attorney one day, and then the next day they're being paid to be a private judge. So Mark Ericson represented the 49er in this case, and he is the one who is currently being sued by a former client in connection with putting that client into private judging. So we've been talking about private judging in all of our live streams. But I want to talk about the Santa Clara Police right now because there's some politics bubbling up in the county, in the city itself, and it centers around the new police chief and the existing police officers. And I will tell you, I have some really good sources inside this police department. I'll never tell who they are, and they're off-record sources, but they have provided me with a lot of information that has been helpful to my reporting. And one of the issues, and I tried to get confirmation on this before I went live because I couldn't remember exactly, but the first criminal case that I covered related to a family court case involved Mark Erickson's case with the 49er. And the 49er was being prosecuted by the Santa Clara County District Attorney. He had been taken to a grand jury, and he was indicted for 2 issues related to 2 different women. So there were a lot of women's groups and activist groups that were speaking out about that, and eventually they shut down the secondary employment because it was becoming too problematic, just like private judging is becoming problematic. And to Larry Lloyd, who said, thanks for the journalism, been subscribed to you for years. I appreciate all of you who have been here that may have started with me in 2019 when I had 68 subscribers, and watching me bumble through how we transitioned from traditional reporting and writing in newspapers and online news organizations to trying to do this in video. Because it's not always easy to do it in video. It's not always easy to know when to turn on your camera and chase a lawyer or ask a police officer some questions. But I do think that my doing this has helped people learn that they need to record things better. And this first case that I covered involving Mark Ericson, the woman did actually record the 49er coming in her home while she was holding their baby. It was the middle of the night. He had his bodyguard with him, and he had been drinking. And that video I got to TMZ and some of the traditional news stations, and I'll put a link into that later this evening when I get home. But that's how this all connects back. But what that case taught me was the relationship between the criminal courts and the family courts. And it taught me a lot about how our criminal courts work. Because when I was covering the criminal case of the 49er, there was an issue over whether or not he had gotten consent from a woman, and the 49ers at the time were training their players that if they were going to have relations with anybody, their wife or otherwise, that if it's their wife it's one thing, but if it was anybody else, even if they were married, that they needed to record the woman giving them consent. And I thought that was an interesting direction that the 49ers had been training their players to do that for some time. And I think the 49er case that I covered was partly responsible for that because there was so much community outrage over these 49ers coming to Santa Clara County and the number of incidences and reports by women about what was going on kind of fueled the Me Too movement. So to the person who said thoughts on sanctuary cities violating federal law, I'm not going to get into that right now because I am watching that, but I am mostly reporting locally because there are too many reporters reporting on federal issues, and most of those federal issues may or not affect all of us. And so I'm trying to show you what affects you mostly in your community. And so secondary employment of police departments is something that everybody should be interested in, because police in California can make easily $200,000 to $300,000, and if you're high ranking, $400,000 or $500,000 a year. So the question then becomes, should we also be allowing them to develop private relationships with other entities to provide security? And it's also concerning that police officers like Tyson Green can leave this department and go to work for the county in code enforcement where there's less oversight about what he's actually doing. And I am covering a code enforcement hearing in Los Gatos, And believe it or not, this all connects, and I'll show you how it does later on. But I'm trying to show you through video, by being in certain locations, how this is all connected. So I just want to go over what I saw in the first criminal case that I covered, because it's similar to people coming to the realization that they need to be careful when they call police, and that police might not respond to complaints the way they think. Police might not investigate things the way they think, and they may not communicate with the district attorney in a manner that is going to get cases criminally prosecuted. And in family court, there is a very definite pattern of anybody reporting abuse or anything, that there is some retaliation. Not only does the DA and the police rarely follow up on those complaints, but the person who made those complaints might often lose custody of their children, their home, or they find themselves subject to paying excessive attorney's fees. So I'm going to just focus right now on what I saw in that first hearing, because as you know, there are not cameras allowed. And it was the first time I had been in a criminal court. District Attorney Jeff Rosen had not prosecuted me for taking a photograph of the police officer breaking my hand yet. So this was the first time I had been in criminal court. I didn't know anything about it. I had only been watching family court, and there are a lot of parallels, but criminal court is supposed to be very public. And so I went into the courtroom right at the time the hearing was scheduled, and I sat in the courtroom, and there was hardly anybody in the courtroom. So I started documenting the time, and I noticed that the attorneys would come in one by one and give a wave to the bailiff and just go back into chambers and chit chat with the judge. And both attorneys on the case, the prosecutor and the criminal defense, were not there. They were going in at different times and chatting with the judge. And there is a lot of issues about when the public sees judges and attorneys in a case communicating in clubs and in friendships. And we've been trying to talk about that too, related to that secret club that Judge Towery was running the whole time he was on the family court bench. And by the way, this 49er case was in front of the Judge Towery. Mark Ericson was representing the 49er after Elise Mitchell. And again, the attorneys for the mother started with Nicole Ford, changed to Heather Smith, and eventually Hector Marino, Sean Ondrick, and Robin Yeamans were the attorneys for the wife. And so I had somebody else covering the family law case, and I was going to cover the criminal case. So not only do I see the attorneys coming in and going back to chambers, and you're thinking, wow, are they having ex parte communication or what's going on? But I also noticed that the bailiff was really chummy with the defendant. And if you've ever been prosecuted for a crime and you know it's BS, or that you're innocent and it's politically motivated or driven by someone's false police accusations, you want to feel like you have fairness in the court. And so I'm not opposed to bailiffs being nice to defendants and to attorneys. I just would like to see it be balanced and consistent. And what was interesting in the 49er case is that the bailiffs all wanted to talk to the 49er about their kids' Pop Warner football, or about the game, or about something. And it was a real bro mentality. And as a former really avid 49er fan when they were in San Francisco, I can understand the culture of that. And if you've ever been, when you go to Chicago and you go watch a Cubs game, or you go to watch a Boston Red Sox game, or you go to certain football games throughout the country, even college games, watching how fans support their teams, you can understand that culture. But when police are getting secondary employment from these teams, they're not just getting it to secure the stadium, but the 49er, who was Mark Erickson's client, had his own private security guard, Sean Pritchard, who was, and I'm pretty sure he was a San Jose police officer, and he's now in charge of the San Jose Police Officers Association. So here's what happened. It took hours for them to start this hearing, and we were waiting in there and waiting in there, and eventually the DA showed up. And I had done a media request. Judge Sena was the judge. He denied my media request. First time I had made a media request in criminal court. And the media requests from previous media on this case had all been granted. So that was a little bit of a red flag. NBC and which has a lot of the football contracts and advertising and everything, was one of the media that got all the requests granted. So the next thing I saw was the district attorney who was assigned to the case. His name was Jim DeMatris, and he's a little guy. He's on the jury questionnaire committee for the state. He's kind of a teacher's pet in the DA's office. I have some videos of him. I personally am not fond of him. He's made some rather rude comments to me that are indicated that he is very much involved in some First Amendment retaliation and protection for his boss, Jeff Rosen, the district attorney. And I've also seen this man on the County Domestic Violence Council with Nicole Ford and Casey Halcone. And I would say that that man has no right to be anywhere near any kind of committee claiming to do anything related to people who are alleged victims of domestic violence. So that's my little 2 cents and opinion. And when I give you my opinion, I'm going to distinguish my opinion from the facts and observations that I've made. So that was my opinion about the prosecutor in the case. The criminal defense attorney was one of those attorneys who is well connected to the DA, takes him golfing, was involved in the bar bench media police committee with Judge Towery. And so we start looking for, was he getting favorable rulings? Now in the other case that I did ask the prosecutor why they had combined 2 very different cases, because one of them involved this woman who was represented by Gloria Allred. And her allegations reminded me consistent of gold digger type allegations where women can make claims against men, ruin their careers, and then get the men to settle out because they just don't want to be in court. And there are people who do that kind of tactic. And it doesn't just apply to women, it also applies to men. But the other case that got consolidated related to the family court case and the child's mother. And the 49ers kind of started a campaign to discredit this woman. And I've seen all the files. They sent her contracts of consultants and pretended like they were going to help her. They funded some of the litigation for her to consult with Eric Geffen before he was a judge. And so all of that was circulating in the background. And I just wanted to watch the hearing for fairness, both for the alleged victims, but also for the defendant, because that's what you do when you're a reporter. So after the attorneys had been in there, after the prosecutor showed up late and told me that he had consolidated 2 cases into one because it would be easier for him to prosecute it, Jim DeMatris said that, I watched the hearing. And the hearing was related to the 49ers' Fifth Amendment rights. And it was very fascinating because what had happened was the police wanted the code to his security camera because he claimed that he had gotten consent. And the woman claimed that he hadn't gotten consent. And he had a security camera inside of his home, and the police wanted to subpoena it. Well, whenever an attorney, a prosecutor, or anybody subpoenas something, your attorney has a right to object. And so the 49ers attorney objected on the grounds of Fifth Amendment. And what they claimed was that he had a Fifth Amendment right not to incriminate himself by giving the code to his security system. And I thought that was really interesting. And that's something that you should all remember when we talk about don't talk to police. When the police ask you for your home security system, even if you think it's fine, don't give it to them. You have a Fifth Amendment right to zip it. Ask for a lawyer. Do not talk to the police. And so Ray McDonald, who was the 49er, was very well trained in doing that. And he got due process because they objected, and that was what the hearing was about. Now, there was another thing that happened at the hearing that I learned about, and this was super shady. So we all hear about witness intimidation and witness tampering, and it appeared that that existed a little bit in the case involving the woman represented by Gloria Allred, because she settled out for money and then suddenly dropped the criminal charges. And that looked really suspiciously tethered. The other woman didn't drop her claims, and she also had to deal with him in family court. And so we were watching how that played out. But on this one particular day, San Jose, I'm pretty sure his name was Sean Pritchard, and I'm pretty sure he was a San Jose police officer. Otherwise, he worked for Santa Clara. But his secondary employment was being a bodyguard for the individual 49er. So on the night of the incident in question, Sean Pritchard showed up, even though he was on duty. So even though he is the bodyguard for this 49er player in his off-duty time, he showed up on duty. So he was going to have to testify, and they called him in to testify. He got on the stand, answered a couple of questions, and then said he needed to go to the bathroom. And I'm the only one sitting in the courtroom, and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. A judge is going to let this witness, it's been months before he testified, and he gets to a hard question, you're going to let him go to the bathroom? And then what was worse was the 49er asked to go to the bathroom, and they said no problem. So I got up and I went and I waited outside the men's bathroom, and I probably should have gone in the bathroom, but I waited outside the men's bathroom as the witness and the defendant went into the bathroom without a security guard watching any of it, had a full-on conversation because I could hear it on the outside, came back, and then Sean Pritchard finished his testimony. So when we talk about police officers and their testimony in court, I just want you to remember that's what I saw. There were no cameras. I remember emailing the PIO, that's the public information officer, and that was just really, really shady. That appeared shady, and usually nobody is watching that. So that's what I wanted to talk about. This was Mark Ericson's client in the family law case. And tomorrow and Friday, we're going to talk more about Mark Ericson's other clients who were women that were associated with that nonprofit that was engaged in what we call runner and cappers. And runners and cappers are people who drum up business for attorneys. They're ambulance chasers. And we know what that looks like for personal injury, but when it comes to drumming up business for criminal defense attorneys or divorce attorneys, it looks a little different, and we're going to talk about that. So I thought secondary employment, let's let that go by. I thought secondary employment of police would be a good opportunity to talk about private judging. So I'm going to sign off now because I need to record. I'm going to go inside and ask for some records. I'm not going to do it in a live because I don't want some other reporters that are in this area circling this department to know what I'm asking for until after I've asked. So thank you, everybody. I'm a little slow on my Los Gatos video that I'm going to drop. It's the one about the accident, Jennifer Branadini, who had the same private judge that Mark Ericson had in his divorce case, and it relates to a code enforcement hearing that I've been covering because they didn't want to give me my records. So I'm trying to show you how hard each of these departments are making it for us to catch the TT. I'm glad you caught the live. I'm trying to show how hard the police officers are making it for individuals to understand what's going on. And one of the records requests I'm going to ask for is their policies and procedures for giving body cams and police reports to individuals who are involved in an incident. Because for those of you who are in family court trying to get your police reports and your body cams, I know it's difficult for you and also for your attorneys. And I have had complaints about this department in particular. So that was a thank you. This is a public service. I appreciate the comment. And so that was today's live, and look for tomorrow where we're going to talk more about the running and capping and the relationship to private judging and a core group of law firms in Silicon Valley that benefited from that. Okay, hope everyone has a good rest of the day.